Well, the International Criminal Court has turned down Palestinian requests to investigate alleged Israeli war crimes on their lands. The official reason for the rejection is that Palestine is not a UN-recognized state. Let's go live now to Jerusalem and talk to Jeff Halper, who's a co-founder and executive director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. Thanks for being with us, Mr. Halper. I'd like to begin with asking you this. The Palestinian Authority has relations with over 130 governments and was granted observer entity status by the UN. Why should a lack of statehood recognition be enough reason to not investigate what could be serious crimes here?
Well, that's exactly the problem. The Palestinians exist in kind of a limbo. Because they're not a state, they don't have access to all the instruments of international law or of the UN system. But at the same time, international law that does apply to the occupied territories, that's intended to protect them, especially the Fourth Geneva Convention, is not enforced by the international community. So on the one hand, they don't have the instruments to protect themselves. On the other hand, the international community doesn't accept its responsibility to afford protection for the Palestinians. And it's the hugest problem we have in international law and human rights, and that is that the instruments of law exist. The courts exist, the institutions exist, but the ability or the will to implement international law on governments like Israel in occupation is completely missing. And then you get peoples like the Palestinians, because they don't have a state, are locked in a situation where they're completely dependent on their own oppressors in order to try to protect and advance themselves.
There are worries that this decision...
So the big problem here, yes.
I just want to touch on one thing while you're mentioning the courts. I want to talk about their impartiality. Obviously, this decision is going to cast some kind of shadow over the war crimes courts' independence and the way they conduct their cases. Do you think its credibility might really be under threat here?
No, I think its credibility is certainly under threat. Look, in a way, it's also caught, because the way the international system is structured, only states have a status. Now, the Palestinians last September went to the United Nations to ask for a status, membership as a state, and the United States declared that it would veto that in the Security Council. Nevertheless, there's still a chance, because if they go back to the General Assembly, they could conceivably get an observer status that's upgraded from what they have today that might give them access to the international courts. The problem with the Palestinians is that occupation was only seen as a very temporary military situation, maybe lasting 1, 2, 3 years until it's over. This is a 45-year occupation, and international law simply isn't geared towards dealing with it. So the fact that the Palestinians aren't a state, I think, completely destroys their chance to use international law. And if, in fact, these millions of people are left without any defense or any ability to leverage Israel through international law, it certainly dents the credibility of the entire system.
Well, and then also when we saw Palestine voted into UNESCO, which of course isn't some might say as important as the Security Council, they were literally punished by the United States. That's right. All their funding pulled out. How does that play into this?
Well, not only were they punished, but UNESCO was punished. A program that deals with millions of needy people all over the world was cut off financially by the United States. I think that the Palestinians have a very key role in the international system. They're the ones that are the test case of whether or not international law really has any relevance, if it can really address the needs of oppressed people, whether or not the big powers that really have the military power, like the United States, can be made to protect the interests of the weak. In a sense, if the Palestinians lose this, if the occupation wins, and the international community is powerless to defend them or to implement international law, I think it sends a chilling message to oppressed peoples everywhere in the world, not only to the Palestinians. The Palestinians are the epitome of this problem, but I think it's a problem that's facing the international community and not only the Palestinians.
All right, Jeff Halper, co-founder and executive director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. Thank you very much for your analysis. Very interesting thoughts there, live from Jerusalem.